Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to Speaking Spurs. Today, we're going to be talking about the 2-1 win over Brighton in the Premier League on Saturday afternoon with that last gasp comeback winner. And that is the third time that we've now done that this season after 90 minutes at home, which is quite interesting considering in the last video we were just talking about the fact that we keep conceding very late in games when we're away from home. So in this game, Ange Postecoglou made two changes from the team that drew to Everton. That was Pat Matasar and Dejan Kulusevski coming back in, and the players coming out of the squad was Pierre-Emile Højbjerg and Brennan Johnson. And what I find interesting about this is I think that Ange Postecoglou, with all the injuries we've had this season, is starting to realise that a bit of rotation in the starting lineup sometimes is needed, as well as just bringing people on late in games to rest players. And also, I think it's the intelligence of knowing that although he's not changing his system, he's very aware that certain players will offer something a little bit different within that system. So someone like Højbjerg will give you a bit more rigidity, a bit more protection to the defence because he's naturally defence-minded over somebody like Kulusevski that very much wants to attack, or Pat Matasar that will just give you the energy and do a bit of everything. We saw the return of Captain Sonny from the Asian Cup of Nations and from the Asian Cup, and Yves Bissouma back on the bench after the African Cup of Nations, of which we saw them come on the pitch as well. So Brighton didn't have their manager Roberto De Zerbi on the touchline. He was actually suspended. They opened the scoring with a first half penalty. Bentancur lost the ball on the edge of our area, and then Mickey van der Ven caught Danny Welbeck's foot in the box. Pascal Gross was the man that stepped up to take that, sending Vicario the wrong way. And as we know from penalties, it's a bit of a gamble anyway. You can have people take a really bad penalty, but for the goalkeepers, they do a bit of research, but most of the time it's pretty much a guess as to whether they get there or not. So, we pushed for a leveller, and it did come on the hour mark. Sarr, who had been really, really good in the second half, I just thought first half a little bit coming back into things at Tottenham, but great in the second half. He deservedly got his goal, and that's his second goal in 2 starts for Tottenham now. So Kulusevski played him through, and then Sarr did the right thing completely, looked up, tried to play that ball along the floor in the box to Richarlison, but Lewis Dunk deflected it onto the right-hand post, and then Sarr followed it up and hit it in from a tight angle. Because of what happened with the goalkeeper moving, it just it made it more difficult for him. So we left it really late in the game, but we did manage to find that winner in the 6th minute of added time, and that was Sonny breaking down and doing exactly what I've been talking about constantly. Ange Postecoglou loves these low crosses through the box, and the reason that I talk about the low crosses from the box that I like is anything can happen. It can deflect off of a player into the back of the net. We saw for the first goal, that low cross, Dunk puts it onto his own post. They can go up for a corner. They can spin up in the air. The keeper might come out to collect it and get in a scramble. I think you've got more of a guarantee to score a goal from that, because if the ball's on the floor, it's actually easier for the striker to score as well, because they're running onto the ball. So their momentum is the way of the ball, and they're just opening their foot and pushing it into the back of the net. Whereas defenders, it's an absolute nightmare because they have to decide whether they take a swipe at it. It sometimes spins backwards off the foot. Do they slide into it? What do they do? But yeah, anyway, so Richarlison involved once again, decided not to score for us today. Thought he'd have a little break and let the others do it. But yeah, played a perfectly weighted pass for Sonny, who got down the left and then whipped the ball along the floor to Brennan Johnson to smash home the goal that sent us absolutely wild. That stadium was rocking when that went in. Vicario completely summed up all of our emotions in that moment. He was celebrating, he ran, he did a knee slide. And it's just great to see how much it actually means to these players, especially players that didn't really have an affinity for the club before this season. So, of that, let's talk about the players themselves. So, Vicario in goal made an early flying save from Danny Welbeck, and then we said he was sent the wrong way from Pascal Gross's penalty kick. He didn't really have much else to do in the game after that, which is a credit to us and our defending, nullifying Brighton to very little chances. Pedro Porro, again, it still wasn't. I don't know what it is with him recently, but he's gone a little bit quiet. Got up and down the flank as much as he could, and then he did appear to be struggling with a knock as the game wore on. Romero in the middle, the best of our defenders on the day, pressed up really high towards the halfway line and won the ball back a few times for us as well, which then helped us transition straight into an attack. He defended pretty well at the back for most of the game, so no real complaints about him. Mickey van der Ven, a little bit of an off day for him, so he lost possession cheaply early that led to the Welbeck chance. He then gave away the penalty in the first half. That was clipping Welbeck's foot. Looked pretty shaky, and I'm not surprised after making a couple of early errors, but he did improve a lot in the second half and played his part in making sure Brighton did not go on to equalise, or, well, take the lead, shall I say. Destiny Udogie out on the left. Another one, as we say, he's been a bit hit and miss this season, and I do put a lot of that down to his age. Solid enough at the back, though, without really doing anything of any standout. Came off with a knock in the final 10 minutes, and that actually came from Romero. It was a sliding challenge that Udogie pretty much got caught up in. But, you know, when you look at something like that, it's just about the desire of our defenders to make sure that we're doing our job and not conceding. It doesn't surprise me that more than one defender is going for the same ball. It's just that desire that we've got running through the team at the moment. Moving into the midfield with Pat Matassar, fairly bright in the first half, but got better and better in the second half. As we've said, he got our equaliser, drilling home with his left foot from a really tight angle, and then he came off himself with 10 minutes to go as he started to tire. And, you know, he's been away, so he is going to tire a bit, but he is one of the fitter lads within the squad. Rodrigo Bentancur. Now, I've seen a lot of criticism from fans of him on social media, especially after yesterday's game, saying that he's not even a good player. Now, let me take you back. When he first signed, he was amazing. Him and Kulusevski were absolutely incredible. It's just coming back from 2 major injuries. Please don't be too critical of him. It's very important. There's going to be something in the back of his mind where he's slightly worried about getting re-injured. It is human nature. If you've just had 2 massive injuries, you've come back from one, instantly gone back out with another injury, you're going to be a little bit cautious. So I think we just need to build his confidence up, and he has to have a run of games where he doesn't get injured, and he will start to take more chances. We will see the better version of Bentancur. But look, it was another slow start from him. He was dispossessed in the build-up to the penalty. He then lost it again, which led to a Matoma chance. Although it was a slightly iffy pass from Vicario. And then just before half hour and almost again moments later, he did get better as the game wore on, but he did come off on about the hour mark. And as I said, it's just about managing him at the moment. That confidence will come back, and we will see that player that is really good on the ball. James Maddison, busy start to the game for him. Put Richarlison away for a chance, and then had a curling effort of his own, just wide. He was then involved in the late goal. He was the one that played the ball to Richarlison. So another one, you know, coming back from injury, he's gradually building up his match sharpness, and I'd expect to see over the next few weeks a much improved Maddison. Now, Dejan Kulusevski. There was moments in this game where he was absolutely epic, but it just seemed to be every time he had like an amazing moment, he followed it up with a cross or a ball that didn't really come to anything. So he had a shot on as he was falling, that was saved by Still. Another player, he was much improved in the second half. He was the one that played the ball through to Sarr in the build-up to our equaliser. And I think he was unlucky to come off because up against Estupiñán, I thought he had him beat all day. There was some real class moments where there was one where he was in between 2 players, managed to flick the ball between them, and it was tight, and he managed to wrestle his way through them and still get the ball, go down on the outside. That one didn't actually come to anything or even a cross. He had to play a pass backwards, or I think he got tackled and lost the ball. But nonetheless, there's some real moments of quality in there from Kulusevski, and I think it's just that final ball now that we're waiting on. And it's something that's, you know, all season has kind of been a bit of a bugbear for him. His goal output and return hasn't quite been up to standards, but he has been jumping about between the attacking of the central 3 and the wide man. So, yeah. Richarlison through the middle. Once again, worked really, really hard. Didn't score today, but I think he scored plenty since he's come back from his surgery, so we can't really moan there. Denied by Still in a 1v1 situation. He then teed up Maddison for that shot that went wide. He then had a couple of efforts blocked or deflected just wide. But, you know, the frustrations in him, they're just not showing anymore. He seems in a better place. He just kept going. And it was actually his pass to Sonny that, as I said, perfectly weighted. So Sonny could run onto it, take it in his stride, that sent the keeper away to grab the late assist. So, you know, Richarlison, I think, is still performing very well. His hold-up play's been good. He doesn't mind coming a bit deeper to do his defensive responsibilities, which is great. Timo Werner, I think, you know, we're not far away from seeing the Timo Werner that we want. He had a quiet first half, had a few runs here and there, and a couple of passes without really threatening. Started the second half well, you know, as many of the players did. That's a running theme in this game. A lot of our players were much better in the second half. He had a strong run where he managed to evade a few challenges before he had a low deflected effort wide. End product, we know that's a bit of a problem in his game. It always has been. It's a bit inconsistent. So, yeah, but decent enough. Then on to the substitutes. Captain Sonny returning, and Romero did run over to put the captain's armband on him. He picked out Johnson for that last gasp winner, and it was a lovely whip ball along the floor. I don't need to talk about it anymore, about these low balls. You're going to hear me talking about it a lot this season. Yves Bissouma started off a bit rusty, but he did get better and better as the half hour he was on the pitch for wore on. Now on to the goal scorer, Brennan Johnson. Had a couple of tame efforts, shall we say. His very first shot that he took when he come on was pretty weak and almost p-rolled into the keeper's arms. But none of that actually mattered as he smashed home the late winning goal in front of the South Stand that absolutely erupted. And honestly, I cannot tell you how loud it was. It erupted. Everyone went absolutely mental. Now, Brennan Johnson, we know he's been very inconsistent. I think, you know, scoring the odd goal here and there is definitely going to help him. There's just something about his game that hasn't quite clicked since he signed for us. But nonetheless, off the bench, he's definitely a weapon. If he's coming on against tiring players, with his pace, he's got the energy to do it. And I think maybe this is the way forward with Johnson for the moment. Bring him on as a bench player. Let him come into games against tiring defenders, get the better of them, and that will build his confidence. So when he comes into a game from the beginning against defenders with energy, he's already got that confidence just to ghost past them. Moving on to Højbjerg, came on to help us just get our shape back in the final 10 minutes and did so. We saw the return of Ben Davies. He replaced Udogie late on as well when he came off with his knock. So, yeah, player-wise, not too bad a game. Let's talk about what Ange Postecoglou had to say after the game. So, about the result and the performance. He was pleased with getting the win. Thought that we actually deserved it in the end for the effort that we put in the second half. He did say the first half wasn't great. But he did credit Brighton. He said, you know, part of this is because Brighton are a good side. They're coached well and very disciplined, and we weren't. We just took a few liberties with our football, our effort and work rate. And a few things have been really good. And he said, and a few things that we've been really good at this year, we just didn't do in the first half. But the second half was a lot better. He said it's always difficult when you're chasing the game, because the opposition can then catch you on the break. But I thought for the most part we handled it well, and I'm pleased. We had guys who could come in and make an impact in the game, and that happened. Now talking about the bench and the options that we have, you know, game changes. He said, yeah, it's very important. I think at the beginning of the year we won a few games late on because of what we have. And he's talking about players like, you know, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, you know, and even Perisic. He was very important at the beginning of the season coming off the bench. We saw that with his assists, saying, you know, the capability of these guys making the impact. He said, I thought they did today. And it also keeps guys on their toes. If they're not performing, gives him some options. You know, at the moment, once everybody's fully fit, you'll see this when Manor Solomon's back as well. And I don't know what's going to happen with Ryan Sessegnon, but once he's back, it just provides that extra bit of competition. And I think in training it makes it better as well, because you've got guys that consider themselves first team players that are going to be battling and pushing, and we won't have to use as many of the youngsters. How much did the team draw on what happened at Brentford in the last game when they were in a similar position being behind? He was like, look, I don't question the guy's character or mentality. We've done that a number of times this year, but I was really disappointed the way we went out in the first half. You can't get away from that. We've got to this point because of certain things we do, and I was disappointed we went away from that. But you can't question the character. The response was very positive. It's easy in that kind of scenario to go into your shell and feel sorry for yourself, but I never felt that with this group. They always responded in the right way when given that sort of guidance. If they took it on board in the second half, and he felt they took it on board in the second half and made a difference to the game. He was asked about having all the players back now, will the momentum build? He was like, well, it should be. And I said yesterday that you've still got to do it. Maybe we were guilty of that and just thought we could roll out there today because we've got a strong squad and think it all just happens. But, you know, there's opposition out there, and Brighton are a good side. We didn't have the right mindset, and it doesn't matter what kind of squad you've got. If you go away from the important things that get you to where you were, sometimes it becomes meaningless. I think the second half was better. He kept reiterating that the second half was better. The focus has been on late goals recently. Does this show why your teams play the way they do, trying to score to the very end? He was like, look, I wasn't trying to be flippant the other day, but if you look at all of my teams historically, they've always done that because the way we approach it is the clock and the scoreboard shouldn't. Let me start again. He was like, look, I wasn't trying to be flippant the other day, but if you look at all my teams historically, they've always done that because the way we approach it is the clock on the scoreboard shouldn't dictate how you play. There you go, that came out better. So if that's your mentality, you should always be looking for goals, irrespective of whether we're winning 1-0 or losing 1-0. Now, sometimes that feels counterintuitive when you're winning 1-0, but I think it helps in games like this and when you're chasing the game because you don't have to change anything. There's no instructions from me. The players know what we do anyway, so it doesn't mean a major shift. If you're trying to become a team that's dominant and wins games of football, I just felt I'd rather err on that side rather than trying to protect things that you have, which is what we saw under Conte. If we had a lead, he'd very much just try and protect it. And I think that's kind of a bit of the way of managers that we've had that have come from Chelsea. Mourinho is the same as well. They get a lead and just think that you can protect it out and 1-0 is enough. I think, if I remember rightly, a lot of times, you know, Chelsea were described as boring Chelsea because they'd win a lot of games 1-0. Were you confident in bringing on those subs to make a difference in the end? He said, I'm not really sure about confident. I was putting on some good players and guys who can make an impact. But again, they've got to do that. Especially in that midfield front third. We've been pretty limited lately in terms of what we can do, just to give us a little bit more energy. Obviously, Brighton were doing really well, but they were working really hard to stay in the game. You know they're going to get tired. The fact that we could bring on two attacking players who are going to be a threat. It maybe looks simple, but that ball that Sonny plays, that's a world-class player in a clutch moment that finds the right pass. You can't do that if you can't bring him on, if it's somebody else. Even Brennan getting on the far post, we've helped him to do that. It's not about confidence. I feel like with the squad we have for today and hopefully moving forward, we do have that ability, irrespective of where the game's at, to finish games strong. Any fresh injuries from the game? He said, no, I don't think so. Destiny went off, but I'm not sure if it was cramp, but everyone else was okay as far as I know. And finger crossed, we're hoping that it was just cramp. He said, was it fatigue with Son and why you used him from the bench? He said, look, we were worried about fatigue. That's why we brought him on in the second half. He was ready to play, wanted to play. If you look, 2 of their games went to extra time. last game was pretty draining as well. So he's talking about South Korea here in the Asian Cup. 2 of them went to extra time. So Sonny's actually racked up quite a few minutes there. So the fact that we had options, if we were desperate, he probably would have started. But we had other options, and that meant we could protect him. I think it was better for him that he came and played the minutes he did. And clearly it was, because he was able to have the energy in the game to come on as Brighton were tiring to play that ball. Is that what a captain is all about? Still coming back from that kind of disappointment of the Asian Cup to deliver the big moments. He said, look, maybe the nation he plays for works against him, but I think he's a world-class player. You look at his record in the Premier League, the toughest league in the world, his goal contributions, irrespective of how the team's gone through the time, he's been here, have always been right up there. And it has, even in, was it last season, I was quite critical of Sonny, but actually if you look at his goal contributions, he's still contributed. But I think the problem is, because he's such a good player, we just always demand more. He said, even this year before he left, I think he was probably the best attacking player in the competition. Just my opinion, obviously. Certainly he'd be up there. He's a world-class player. I thought we did well to cover his absence. Richie obviously stepped up in terms of a goal threat, and a few other players. But to have a world-class player for the run-in is brilliant for us. And, you know, I do like Ange Postecoglou's press conferences. Sometimes he gets involved in a bit of banter with people, but his answers, they make sense. There's no hidden agenda behind them. Now just a little bit, we'll talk about Yves Bissouma's half-time pep talk for Bentancur, and then what Vicario did to Christian Romero. That South Stand, I mean, that's where my season ticket was, and it's a great atmosphere, the South Stand. When I was at White Hart Lane, I used to sit on the East Stand, but I have to say that South Stand, when it gets going, it is absolutely rocking. But yeah, the 2 substitutes combined to send most of the 61,445 fans inside that stadium, including Dele Alli, he was in there as well, into absolute delirium. And as I said, it erupted. So where am I going? Let me get there. Yeah, when that goal went in, actually, you actually saw, so some of the bench players actually came down the touchline onto the pitch to join in with the celebrations. Dragushin threw himself into the bundle alongside Pat Matassar, Bentancur, Udogie, and Udogie was actually wearing an ice pack on his left knee. Romero was the last to actually reach Johnson, giving the young attacker a tight squeeze before saying something into his ear and ruffling his hair, as he does. And we spoke about this last season. Romero is actually quite violent to our goal scorers. He just comes in and hits them. Maddison fell to his knees in that mixture of like euphoria and relief, tiredness that we've managed to do it. And I spoke about earlier, Vicario sprinting across his own penalty area to do that knee slide in front of all the fans, which I thought was a pretty epic moment. So the final whistle actually came a minute or so later. The Italian was so happy by the last gasp victory that he grabbed Romero. It was really strange, because you'll see the photos of Romero looking like this. What happened is they sort of came to each other, celebrated. Vicario just grabbed his shirt, lifted it up, and was doing this in front of his face. And it just completely epitomised where this squad is at. It was a funny moment. So the roaring defender, who was at the same time, he was grabbing Vicario as well by the sides of his shirt. He then grabbed the Italian's head in response and almost took it off. It was so strange that Romero is just so violent with his own players when he's happy. He's like that big brother that has just has a bit of self-control issues. But yeah, some of the Brighton fans thought that Johnson's hand gesture after the goal was a bit of a dig at João Pedro's celebration after his goal against Spurs in the reverse fixture. And this celebration swapping seems to be a bit of a theme now, which we obviously saw in the last game against Brentford with the dart throwing that ended up being the celebration for everybody's goal in the end. But Johnson did explain afterwards that it was actually a nod to his favourite wrestler, Jeff Hardy, that makes such gestures with his hands. And any of you that have watched the WWE that used to be the WWF, you would know what we're talking about. So it was another special moment for the Spurs team. You know, we're still trying to get to grips. There's some fans out there that are disappointed with where we're sitting. But when you look at it, if we'd have said at the beginning of the season, look, you're going to have a brand new manager, and in that first season, you are going to hang around the top four, I think most of us would have taken it, because we've brought in managers that should have been, you know, world class and made the difference, and we've struggled. We've brought in a completely fresh manager that has consistently won trophies. He's won league titles. His teams have always been up there. He made an Australian side better. So actually all the ingredients were there. But sometimes these managers will come into a really big club and struggle to get the players on side. But I think Ange, based on his age and just the way he talks to people, it just kind of commands the respect. But yeah, what else was happening here? Yeah, so I think when Brennan was talking a little bit more about that, it was another special moment for a Spurs team that's still in its formative stages as Postecoglou continues to lay bricks in the foundation of the club and wants us to be. Maddison was all for the late drama, even if he would like a more relaxing day occasionally. So Maddison talking was, look, we seem to do that a lot, don't we? I'm dying for a comfortable 3-0 win, but there's a beauty to winning late and scoring goals like that at the death. Having to show real character and mentality to keep going at the end of games like that. It's a wonderful feeling. That was his club interview after the game. He said, Brighton are a really good team, well-drilled team. When you're out there sometimes and you play at this level against teams like that, you can really feel you're up against a well-drilled team. And that they're well coached and they've got a good system. They're all on the same wavelength. That's why they cause teams problems and why they're knocking on the door of the big six for a couple of years now, not just as a one-off. We knew it was going to be tough. In the second half, we were a lot better once we figured out the build-up. They pressed man-to-man all over the pitch and leave a lot of space in behind. But if you can't get the half yard from the man who is on the ball to play the pass with quality, then you can struggle. I think we found that early on. We kept going, and the winning goal was a really nice goal. It was a really good move from the build-up all the way, exactly how the gaffer wants us to play. So I think that he'll be happy with that one. He then also added, the gaffer is always going on about how he wants the other winger at the back post, and it's absolutely a brilliant cross from Sonny. Brennan is listening and learning and taking on what the gaffer wants him to do, and he scored a couple at the back. Sticks, a fair play to him. I actually couldn't make it to the celebrations. My legs were too goosed. I just had to fall on the floor and celebrate. That stand, though, the whole stadium was brilliant today and pushed us on all the way. But that is a special stand, and he's actually talking about the South Stand. He said that goal, all the late goals seemed to come at that end. Big thank you to the fans as well today, because you kept us going. You don't realise sometimes that when you're in one of those games, when you're thinking, could it be one of those days when you maybe don't push for that winner, but you keep us going, and that little 1% does help, so thank you. Yeah, and I think it is true. And it is no coincidence that those late goals have actually come in front of the South Stand, because when it gets rocking, it really, really drives the players on. And that's no disrespect to the North Stand, but, you know, it tends to be where you get more of the families going. So, you know, you get a lot of, like, small kids that, you know, make less noise. But, yeah, we found it tough against Brighton. We really did. They are very organised. They're just they've been a bit inconsistent this season. That's all it is. They just haven't really scored enough goals. They play good football. They've conceded a few more than they probably should have done. But yeah, they are a good side, and with a bigger budget, I think they'd be further up there. But you know, with all that in mind, it was much tighter in possession than most Tottenham home games are. You know, we only edged it with 52% of possession, 45 445 passes to the Seagulls 391. So they still completed a lot of passes as well. And normally there's a bigger gap. And that just goes to show you how Brighton's style of football really is. We did have more shots on goal, though, with 16 to their 6. And 6 of ours were on target compared to 3 of theirs. You know, and as we say, Vicario didn't really have a lot to do. But saying that, Brighton were always some sort of threat, because there were a lot of times, even late when we drove on in the second half, that Brighton were in and around our box. We just managed to limit them from actually taking those shots. We're actually joint second now on the longest scoring streak in Premier League history. So we've now scored in 36 consecutive matches, and we found a way once again to win even when not in full flight. And that's the mark of a great team being forged right in front of our eyes. To be able to dig out wins when we're not really at the races is exactly what we need. Now, I can't remember what I've done with the bit that I was going to talk about with Bizuma. Hang on. Let me see if I can find it. Do apologise. No, I think I've lost it. Anyway, not to worry. Not to worry at all. We'll talk about that another time. But look, nonetheless, we are still performing to a very high level despite everything we've been through this season. It's been very, very tough so far. Hopefully now we're going to have just players back and we're not going to struggle with any more injuries. I don't think I could take any more. But like, the plus side is, even through this injury crisis, it did take us by a bit of a shock to start with. It took a bit of getting used to, but actually the players that came in to replace them, or players like Richarlison, have had no choice but step up. They've really done so, which sets us in good stead, because it means there's now more competition for places, because those players have become first team players. So yeah, thank you very much for that. I hope you enjoyed that video. I have been Kieran from Speaking Spurs. Don't forget to subscribe, like and comment. And until next time, come on you Spurs.